A Chinese man named Edward was cruelly tied to a pole by racist officers who treated him as nothing more than a joke. These officers, blinded by prejudice, never imagined the man they humiliated was about to become their new police chief. Fate had a powerful twist in store, turning the tables in a way no one saw coming. But just wait until you hear how this shocking story unfolds and why justice ultimately prevailed against all odds. The man walked into the sheriff's station at 8:17 a.m. sharp, wearing a pressed navy suit and holding a slim black briefcase. He didn't speak loudly, didn't ask for much, just inquired politely where the sheriff's office was. That alone was enough to draw a look from Deputy Merrick. "What are you, a tax guy?" Dale muttered, not lifting his boots off the desk. His partner, Trevor, snorted. "He's gotta be lost. We don't do interviews with delivery guys." The man didn't flinch. He repeated his request. That was when the joking started. Light at first. A nickname, a fake accent, a few quiet laughs from behind the glass wall. Then Trevor nudged Dale and said, "Let's show him the back lot. Might be the only tour he gets." They led him outside. No one questioned it. No one stopped them when they told the man to wait by the pole. No one blinked when zip ties came out. No one interfered when a cardboard scrap was scribbled on with permanent marker. Didn't knock, now he waits. They tied it around his neck, laughed, took photos, left him standing there in the cold behind the garage, alone. He said nothing, not a single word. Just stood there, wind tugging at his shirt, eyes locked on the asphalt. Inside, Trevor sipped coffee like it was any other morning. Dale bragged about how the guy barely blinked. A secretary asked if she should tell someone. Trevor grinned. "He'll walk it off." But the man didn't walk off. He waited. And what none of them knew, not Dale, not Trevor, not the half-dozen others who ignored what happened, was that the man they tied to a pole that morning wasn't there for a delivery or an interview or a ticket. He was already their new boss. Behind the police station, the world felt different, still, cold, too quiet for a Monday morning. Edward Chang stood tethered to a metal pole, wrists bound behind him with plastic ties that bit into his skin with each subtle movement. The cardboard sign around his neck shifted in the wind, brushing against the buttons of his suit. "Didn't knock. Now he waits." The message wasn't clever, but it did what it was meant to do. It marked him. His briefcase had fallen when they pushed him. One clasp was broken now. Papers inside, a copy of his contract, a federal onboarding folder, and a letter from the commissioner, remained scattered just out of reach, spotted with grit from the gravel. He looked down at nothing, not in anger, not in shame, just in silence. Inside the building, laughter rang faintly through the walls. Through the frosted window of the break room, Edward could just make out the shape of Deputy Merrick, pacing with a coffee in hand, reenacting the tour for amused officers. Someone clapped, someone else whistled. It was all just another story to them. A joke for later. No one came to check on him. Not the young officer who watched it happen from the hallway. Not the clerk who saw the photos being passed around. Not the supervisor who chose to look the other way. Edward breathed in slowly. The early morning chill was starting to crawl under his collar. His suit had been tailored last month in D.C., pressed again just the night before. It wasn't made for this. But that wasn't what stung the most. What cut deeper than the zip ties was the ease with which it had all happened. No suspicion, no curiosity, not even hesitation. These were sworn officers, trained men. And still, the second they saw someone who didn't look the part, they reached for mockery instead of a handshake. And Edward let them. He let them. Because he needed to know, not what they said in meetings or wrote in reports or wore on their uniforms, but who they were when no one was watching. And now he knew. At 8:57, a patrol SUV pulled into the lot. It idled for a few seconds. The rookie behind the wheel froze when he saw Edward still standing there. He didn't get out. He simply backed up, turned around, and drove off. No radio call, no mention. Edward didn't move. Every second dragged. Every breath reminded him where he was and why he was here. He had worked for decades in federal enforcement. He had dealt with cartel informants, corruption rings, national hearings. But this small town station with its lazy walls and smug grins was beginning to hurt in ways no case file ever had. And yet, Even in this moment of stillness and ache, Edward felt something shifting inside him. Something quiet, not rage, not vengeance, just clarity. He was exactly where he needed to be. At 9:04, the station gate slid open again. A black sedan rolled in. One driver, one passenger. The driver stepped out first. Crisp shoes, silver badge. Then came the passenger. Older, broader, the kind of man whose presence made others straighten up whether they liked him or not. The commissioner. He looked at Edward. No expression, no questions. Just a slow nod. It was time. The moment Edward stepped through the main doors of the station, no longer restrained, no longer ignored, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations dropped mid-sentence. Coffee mugs hovered half-raised. Deputy Dale, who had been leaning casually near the dispatch desk, froze when their eyes met. His lips parted slightly. Words didn't come. Behind Edward walked Commissioner Hardy, a man not known for subtlety or small talk. His silence spoke louder than any rebuke. He nodded to the receptionist, then turned and addressed the room with a voice low and direct. Conference room, now. It wasn't a request. Edward didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His presence alone, upright, composed, still wearing the same suit from earlier, now with the tie slightly loosened, carried more weight than any raised voice ever could. Dale moved first, his usual swagger gone. Behind him came Officer Trevor, cheeks visibly pale, eyes darting to the commissioner, then back to Edward. One by one, the rest followed. The room filled slowly, chairs scraping awkwardly against the floor. Inside, the tension was electric. No one dared speak until Hardy cleared his throat and placed a small folder on the table. It had one name typed neatly on the tab: Chang Edward. "This," Hardy said flatly, "is your new commanding officer." The pause that followed was long, thick. No reaction, no applause, just stunned silence. Hardy turned slightly toward Edward. "If you'd like to say something." Edward stepped forward, not rushed, not theatrical, just steady. "I wasn't introduced this morning," he said. "That was unfortunate, but I believe in making my own introductions." He opened the folder, pulled out a document, and set it gently on the table. An official federal transfer order. His credentials followed. His badge, his authority. Then he looked up, straight at Dale. "I've read all of your files," he said. "I know who's been late to court hearings, who's rewritten reports, who thinks no one's watching." Dale blinked, once. Hard. Edward didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You were right about one thing," he added. "I didn't knock." His eyes moved across the table. "But I'm here now." He paused. "And I'm staying." There was no threat in his tone, no anger, just clarity. Across the room, younger officers exchanged nervous glances. Some straightened in their seats. One reached instinctively for a notepad. For the first time, they weren't laughing. They were listening. In that moment, the balance of power shifted. Quietly. Permanently. It didn't erase what had happened. It didn't undo the humiliation. But something stronger had begun. A reckoning. And for Edward, that was enough for now. The wind outside continued to move the sign left behind on the pole. But inside the room, a new sign had just been posted, and everyone read it clearly. By Monday morning, the energy in the station had changed. Subtle, but undeniable. No one dared lean back with their boots on the desk anymore. The hallway that had once echoed with careless jokes now pulsed with clipped footsteps and quiet conversations. Edward's presence had become more than a surprise. It had become a standard. His first official act was not a grand gesture. No press conference, no sweeping speech. Instead, he walked into the file archives and requested 10 very specific case numbers, old complaints, internal reviews that had gone nowhere, patterns that had been ignored. He spent hours reviewing them, not looking for drama, but for truth. By midweek, 3 officers were placed under internal investigation. 2 more were quietly reassigned pending review. None of it made headlines. But inside the department, the message rang louder than any siren. This man means business. Even more unexpected was how he handled the junior staff. Officer Maria Klein, who had kept her head down for years, was called into his office. She stepped in nervously, expecting criticism. Instead, Edward pointed to a commendation she'd received 5 years earlier, buried in her file. "No one ever followed up on this," he said. "I read the report. That was real work. I want to see more of it." She left his office different, shoulders higher, back straighter. Soon, others began to shift too, not out of fear, but out of a strange new feeling, pride. The most vocal change came during Thursday's morning briefing. Edward entered the room and stood before the department without a clipboard, without notes. "I won't ask for respect," he said. "That's not how this works." He paused. "But I will ask for discipline, for professionalism, and for service. Not just to the law, but to the people outside this building. You don't have to like me. You don't have to like each other, but you will do your jobs." He let the silence settle before finishing. "And if you don't want to, that door's still unlocked." No one moved. He gave a single nod and walked out. Briefing ended. Later that day, Dale knocked on Edward's office door. His eyes were tired, his voice quieter than usual. "I'm not proud of how I acted," he said. Edward didn't interrupt. Dale took a breath. "I didn't know who you were. That's not an excuse. I just didn't think I'd have to answer to someone like you." Edward met his eyes. "You do now." No threats. No raised voices, just truth, spoken without hesitation. Dale nodded once, then left. Outside, the flag in front of the station moved gently in the morning breeze. Inside, respect was no longer demanded. It was earned. And the man they had once tied to a pole? He now stood at the center of a department that was finally learning what leadership looked like. Weeks passed, then months. The headlines had long moved on. No one in the city talked about what had happened that afternoon behind the station. No cameras had captured it. No official report ever mentioned the pole. But the department remembered. And it remembered not because of fear, but because of what came next. Officer retention improved. Complaints dropped. Community trust, once fractured, began to rebuild, brick by brick. It was a slow process, deliberate, but real. Edward didn't seek applause. He worked early, left late, walked the same streets he once walked as a child. He nodded to the same shopkeepers, waved to the same families. But now, when people looked at him, it wasn't with confusion. It was with respect. He had become more than the man who wore the badge. He had become a standard. One morning, a boy knocked on the door of the precinct. He couldn't have been more than 10. His father, he said, had told him this was a good place now, that the man in charge listened. Edward stepped out to meet him. The boy held out a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing, a stick figure with glasses, a badge, and a big smile. Above it, in uneven handwriting, "Thank you for not being like the others." Edward knelt to the boy's level. "You're welcome," he said simply. "But remember, you can be someone people count on too." As the boy ran back to the sidewalk, Edward stood in the doorway a moment longer. The past had tried to humiliate him. The system had tried to overlook him. Some officers had tried to break him, but he had stood firm, with patience, strength, and integrity, not by shouting louder, not by fighting dirty, but by showing what true leadership looks like. And though many still didn't know the story, the station was no longer the same. Because sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it arrives quietly and stays.